Hey everyone, welcome back to Modern React tutorial series. And in this video, I'm going to talk about components. If you haven't watched my previous videos, in this series, I'm going to share the link of the playlist where you can follow along other videos because, this video is somehow dependent on the previous videos. So I highly recommend you start watching the series from the start. I'll share the link in the description. So in this video, we are going to talk about components. Now in the last video, I have told you how to create elements in React. So we create all of these React elements using something called a new magical syntax language called JSX, which is, extension to JavaScript. So we use JSX for creating small elements of our React application. And you see, I have created an element using the HTML and combination of JavaScript. So I've created h1 tag with hello string, and this name is a JavaScript variable, which I have used here. And I am rendering this element using React DOM.render function, something like this. I don't see any problem, creating all of these elements and rendering into the DOM. But our applications, they're made of elements, but we can't just render the elements using the React DOM.render method. We need some way to divide our application into smaller divisions or smaller components, I would say. That's where the smart developers at React, they have created components. Now, what is the problem with this one, right? So I have created a variable name here. So this is constant name, which has a value of John. Now, there is a problem with JavaScript, right? I can't create another name constant or another name variable in the global scope because this is global scope of JavaScript, right? So I can't create name once again. Similarly, if I have created one element, one JSX element, I can't create another constant with element as a variable name. Now this is a problem. I mean, this is not wrong. This is how the scoping works in JavaScript, but we need a way, right, to scope all of these variables. And if you can guess how we handle scope in JavaScript, React is all about JavaScript. So how we handle scope in JavaScript? Can you guess? It's using functions, right? So I can just write a function, say I can write a greeter function, and inside that greeter function, I can create another const name with some other value, say Linda. This is perfectly all right because this constant name belongs to greeter function, and this constant name belongs to global scope. Similarly, I can go ahead and create another element inside this function. Maybe I can copy this for the time being. I'm going to copy this one from here and paste it here. This is completely all right because this element is in global scope and this element is in a local scope of this greeter function. So coming back to the point, that's why React team has created components. And all of these elements, these small elements which we create using JSX, they go inside the functions. And components are nothing but functions. So what is component first of all? So components, they let you split the UI into independent reusable pieces and think about each of the pieces, in isolation. So let's see how we can convert this JSX greeter program into component. I'm going to use the similar example and we're going to use this element, and later we will see how we can pass this name as an attribute to that particular component and get it rendered here. So let's start and let's convert this JSX into a component. So I'm going to start from scratch. So to create a component in React, you just need to write a function greeter. I'm going to create Now, one thing you might have noticed here, this G is capital, right? So this is a standard convention we follow in React. Whenever we create a component, we start its name with a capital letter. See that? And this isn't true for the element. Whenever we create an element, we start with a small letter. So this is a convention, which distinguish between an element and a component. So this greeter function is actually a JavaScript function, but it's a component in React. Now I'm going to create the element inside this function. And this time I'm just going to render hello John, I would say. So now we don't need this element here. So I'm going to remove it, or I'm going to keep it for some time. Now, instead of rendering this element inside the DOM, inside the React DOM, I'm going to render this component. Now this is a component in React. Components are simple functions in React. Now I can take this name, like how I have used this element. I can take this greeter name and I can render inside the DOM. But I need to follow a special HTML syntax for it. So basically this function I'm going to write in HTML fashion, something like this. Because this is a component in React. This function is a component in React. So you just need to take this name, use this syntax, like how we write HTML element, like h1 or any other tag in HTML. Similarly, we can write components in React. Now, if I save this program, nothing is going to work because I need to return my element from this function. So I'm going to return my element, and now see that? Hello John. So instead of writing my element here outside, I have created a function called a greeter function. And inside that, I have created that element, and this is a JSX element only. You know about JSX, we discussed about JSX in the last video. If you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you go and watch that video where I have explained what is JSX and how to write JSX using JavaScript also. So this element, I just took it from the global scope. I put it into local scope of a function, and I'm just returning that element from here. Now we have solved our first problem. My element is no more in the global scope. It's in the local scope of this greeter function, or I would say a greeter component. So, but how am I going to change this John, right? Say suppose I need a way, right? So if you see here, I have created this constant name is equals to John, and then I'm using this name using this curly bracket syntax inside my JSX. How can I do the same inside a component, right? I can do something like this. I can create a variable name, a local variable, and I'm going to give it a value of John, and I can use a similar syntax. So I'm going to replace this with name. Okay. Now see, it's coming hello John. Well, let me try to change the name from John to Sandip. You see that? The output is hello Sandip. Now both the problems are solved, right? I mean, I don't have my name John in the global scope and element also not in the global scope. But this is not a way. I mean, this is a hard-coded way, right? Name is always going to be Sandip, and if I want to change that name, I have to do changes here. Is there a way, I can pass this name value to this function? And right, functions can take argument. This is beauty of JavaScript, right? I can pass arguments to my function. So how can I pass this name argument to this component? So by default, all React component get something called props as an argument. And this props is nothing but collection of props which we can pass to this component while creating this component here. So let's see what's the value of props. Now I'm going to console.log the value of props. So if I console.log props, and if I open the console window, let me expand it a bit. See that it is object, and right now I don't have any value in this object. Now this console is not properly visible and somehow my layout is not good. Let me change the view from here. I think this looks good. So we have our console here. So as I said, we can log the props variable. So let me change this to Sandip1 and let's see what comes inside console. Now my program is saved and I'm getting object as an output. So console.log props. So as I told you, by default, React passes a props property to our React components. Right now, my greeter component isn't passing any property. So let's pass some property. So properties are nothing but name and value, like how we define properties or attributes in HTML. Like take the example of anchor element, anchor element has href attribute. That's a property. Similarly, I can create custom properties or custom attributes for my components. So for my greeter, I'm going to create a name property or attribute, I would say, and I'm going to pass it a value of say Linda. Now, look at here. Now we are getting this props here, and props has one property called name. Even I can pass two different values or many values, I would say first name, or I'll go with name and age. That would be simple. So I'm going to use name property and I'm going to use age property. So age is equals to say, I'm going to pass 25. Now if you come to console, see that age 25, name Linda. So I can pass multiple properties to my component and it's getting stored into this props object. Now object has name and value. So now I can use this props. Now I can use this props object to replace this name property. So I'm going to use props.name. See that? Hello Linda. So now we have the solution to both the problems. So I don't need this code basically. So let's do a quick comparison here, like initially we were defining all of our element in the global scope. Now I took that element and I have moved it into a JavaScript function. But this is a special function here in React. It's called a component function. I have moved my element into this function, and we know function gets something called props, and how we can pass props. So this is how we instantiate our component. This is very much similar to how we write HTML elements. Similarly, I have written my greeter element here, and these attributes are nothing like HTML attributes, which I can pass. So I have passed name and age, name, value. I can take all of those properties through this props object. I've logged it. We have seen it here. And I have used all the power of JSX, I have combined hello, this is a string, with props.name. So I'm going to remove this part. We don't need it. And even we don't need this part also. So this is how we create component in React, and this is how we pass the props, and this is how we render the props. Now I can create multiple instances of greeter, with different values. So I can show you that example, So I'm going to create one more component here. I'm going to write one more function called app. So now I'm creating app component, which is going to aggregate or which is going to combine different greeter component with different values. So components are function, right? So I have written a new function called app. This is just an app component, I can say. And inside this app, I'm going to create a div element. And we basically need to return it. Now this time I'm going to wrap it inside my JSX syntax, these round brackets. And inside these div, I'm going to create different instances of greeter component. So I can write something like this. Actually, I don't need it, but I can write it this way also. And I'm going to pass name. First one will be John. And I'm going to create one more greeter component with name of Linda. I can create one more with the name of Sonia. Now, instead of rendering this greeter component, I'm going to render my app component. See that? Hello John, hello Linda, hello Sonia. So I have created an app component which is acting like an aggregator of different greeter components. So once I have a component is like a small function, small reusable function. I can call that function so many times with different values. You see the power of components? This is how we divide our application into small components, and we create all those components, and then finally we combine all those components together to create a full-blown React application. If you haven't watched my Thinking in React video, I highly recommend you watch that video where I have explained how we can divide our application into small components. And in the upcoming videos where we are going to write React application, again, I'm going to revisit that Thinking in React part, and I'm going to explain how we can divide our big application into smaller components. Then we'll create all those components, we'll aggregate those components together, and we'll see what are the best practices we use in React. So this is it. This is all about component in React. Components are nothing but functions which got props. This is how we can create the components using normal HTML syntax. We can pass attributes to this component, which are nothing but props in the component. So I'm going to see you in another modern React tutorial. Till then, bye.